Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy that you joined our expert talk with my special guest from California. And good morning to California, of course. And I hope that tonight we are going to learn a lot. Not I hope, I'm sure, I'm convinced that we will, because we have a guest who is like a guru of PBL for me. So I'm really looking forward to this special event. But before I give the floor to my guest, I will share my screen because I want to show you the group who is organizing this webinar. So it's a Teacher Academy Alumni PBL course group. It's a bit too long name. I hope that I will change it somehow. But anyway, this group is a featured eTwinning group of teachers who are interested in project-based learning and really implementing this PBL in their schools, in their classrooms. So what you can find here, it's this group started to exist just or to be active in September, and you can find basic information about what is PBL, then what are components of good project-based learning, and then how to formulate driving questions, then subpage about collaboration, what does it mean, and also rubric of collaboration. And then of course, we will organize, I will try to organize every month an expert talk. The first one was with Daisy Dyer from USA again, and the topic was You Matter, about Genius Hour. And then you have, of course, or we will have activities. The first one is for Christmas, and that's why it's such a sweet activity, make a difference with sweets. And I would like to invite you all to join this activity and to prepare. Please share first your recipes of typical regional sweets that you prepare for Christmas, and then sell it, and then organize events for charity, or just visit elderly people and organize it with program or whatever. Just something. Let your students, your children organize this nice event before Christmas, and let them do something that is maybe meaningful for them, and they can be proud, and they can just make a difference for their community. So this is event that I would like to really organize, and I invite you all to join. And we will then go on with Teach Meet, and also with Twitter chats. And what I did was also I put this dot storming, and if you have any problems, and you already have, with implementing project-based learning in your classroom, then you can just write it to this dot storming, and of course not only write your problems, but try to share, to comment, and to share your ideas, your experience as well, and to help each other. And then we also have these forums and help corner. So if you have any problem, any question, of course you can add it to this forum, and we will try somehow together to solve it and motivate and inspire each other. So this is just the beginning of this group, but the most important, what we are going to organize our expert talks, and I'm really happy that now we have a really special guest from California, because as I already told, he's a guru of PBL for me, and I was so happy when he accepted my invitation. It was really one of the big moments for me. I remember that moment exactly, that I just wanted to jump in that moment. So, John Larmer, now I will give you the floor because I think that it's time to start learning with you. We were waiting for this moment for a long time. So thanks a lot again that you accepted my invitation. And now, please, floor is yours.
You're welcome, Cornelia. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be with you all. So I will be covering a lot of material in our 1 hour together. So forgive me if I speak fast in a California accent. I'll try and slow down, and please feel free to ask questions. And Cornelia, perhaps if you see some questions that are on the same theme and you want to relay them to me, that might be good too. But I'll try and look at your questions during the webinar. There will be time during the webinar to stop and answer questions, and also at the end I will try to leave at least 5 or 10 minutes for your questions. I saw many of your questions in advance, and many of them are familiar questions to me. We get those a lot from people who are just starting out with project-based learning, or PBL. I know some of you have never done PBL before, some of you are just trying it, and some of you might have done PBL already and already know some of the things I'll be covering. But let me talk about what we'll be doing today. I'm editor-in-chief at the Buck Institute for Education, which is a nonprofit in California near San Francisco. And we are all about project-based learning. I'm the author of several books about it and help design our workshops for teachers. And we also provide services to schools and districts all over the United States and around the world, too. We have not been to Europe too much, a little bit in the UK and Spain, actually. We made some presentations there last year. We've been to Asia several times and Australia. So we're glad to see PBL is spreading around the world. I'm glad you're here. All right, I mentioned we're a nonprofit, and we're growing fast. We're very small, but now we have about 25 employees and consultants all over the world. Excuse me. These are our learning goals for today. I'm going to talk about what it means to do high-quality PBL, what we call the gold standard model for good project-based learning. I'll talk about the need to make projects authentic, so students care about them, and that will increase their engagement, their interest in the project and learning. I'll talk about how to write a good driving question for a project and give you some advice about assessment and management during project-based learning. And I mentioned feel free to ask questions anytime. All right, now some of your questions that I saw in advance made me create this slide. Here's 3 pieces of advice I would give you, and keep this in mind during my talk today. When you're new to project-based learning, it can seem like a lot, and it's different for students and parents and teachers. So my advice would be to start with less ambitious projects. Keep them shorter and simpler. I'll talk more about this later. Second, limit students' choices of topics and products. Many people think it means you just let students go and investigate whatever they want, and you have 25 kids in a class, and there's 25 different topics and projects going on. But when you're first starting out especially, I think it's better to have fewer topics for students to choose from, perhaps even it's just one topic for the class. And they have some choice during a project, but perhaps they're all going to create the same product. For example, they're all going to make a video commercial about something, instead of one group making a video, another group doing a presentation, and a third group making posters. And finally, provide structure. This is another thing that people new to project-based learning often forget, that you need to still teach and structure the experience for students. It's not just students working independently all the time. And have frequent checkpoints along the way to make sure students are learning what they need to learn and producing their work in high quality. So it takes a lot of engagement by the teacher to keep track of what's going on during the project. All right, let's talk then about why project-based learning is getting so popular. We've noticed in the last 5 years or 6 years now that PBL is getting a lot of interest. And so We're happy to see that because we think project-based learning really does increase student engagement in learning. School is boring for so many students, but with a good project, it's not boring. It makes a real-world connection. It helps students see what they're learning, how it applies to the real world. And they often can solve real-world problems and work on issues in their community, their nation. And it makes them feel like they're really tied into the real world, not just waiting and learning things for the future, but learning things because they need to learn them today for a good project. Research shows that when project-based learning is done well, it improves outcomes. Students remember what they learn longer, and they also learn those 21st century skills, which we call success skills. Things like how to be a good critical thinker, problem solver, communicator, collaborator, things that are useful in today's modern workplace and useful in their lives as citizens. And finally, project-based learning enables the use of technology. A lot of students these days, of course, love to use technology, and PBL allows them some wonderful ways to use technology. But it is not the goal of a project. I should always say that. It's a tool during a project. The goal is not just to learn this fun piece of technology. Here's a definition of project-based learning. And by the way, all of this is on our website, bie.org. A lot of the material I'll be sharing with you, you can find on our website. We have a lot of examples of projects there. We have project planning tools. We have videos showing projects. We have some student handouts, which I'll be showing you later. Lots of blogs and articles. We also have books for sale about project-based learning. And this is the definition we have on our website. You can see here it's working for an extended period of time. That means it's not just a couple of days. It's usually a couple of weeks long, a project. And it needs to be authentic and engaging and complex, not a simple question or a problem students are solving. All right, we talk a lot about the main course, not the dessert, because many people do projects which are not really all that in-depth. They're what we call a dessert project. Students aren't thinking very hard. It might be fun, it might taste good, but it's not nutritious. It doesn't actually teach what you want them to learn. I'll give you some examples of this. This is a common problem these days because a lot of people are saying, oh, we do PBL, but is it really main course PBL or is it dessert? Here's an example. In California, where I'm from, when in fourth grade, 10-year-old students build a model of a Spanish mission. Around 1800, the Spanish built 21 missions up the coast of California to bring Christianity to the Indians and establish their rule over this part of the world. And typically, a teacher would teach all this about the Spanish history, a traditional way with textbooks and lectures and worksheets. And then the teacher would ask students to go home and build a model of one of the California missions, these churches. And that's a dessert project. The building of the mission is not the way the students learn. All you really learn there is maybe what a mission looks like and how to build it out of cardboard or sugar cubes or something. So that's a dessert project. It's done at the end of a unit of instruction or on the side, perhaps. It's not the main way that the content is taught. You see a lot of these in schools. In science, students might build a little model of a habitat, a forest or a rainforest or a desert. These are not bad assignments, I should say that. It's not bad to do these kind of things. It's just not project-based learning. They're fun, they do teach things, but it's not true in-depth project-based learning. Or this one, engineering, math and science project, students build a model of a bridge out of toothpicks. Again, it might be a good assignment, but just doing the model, building something is not project-based learning. Or doing a web quest, a research paper about a famous mathematician and a presentation. All of these are good, but they're not really in-depth project-based learning. You're seeing this kind of thing now. Commercial publishers are producing materials they call project-based learning. But really, it's just a bunch of activities around a theme. It's not in-depth project-based learning. So what if, instead of building that model of a mission, Let me give you an example of main course project-based learning. What if the teacher began the whole unit about Spanish history in California, maybe just a quick introduction to the Indians and the Spanish, and then the teacher at the beginning of the unit gave students a letter like this. Dear keepers of the missions of Alta California, the church is eager to establish another mission, the 22nd, after we build the one now being planned for Sonoma. Please tell us exactly where you think the mission should be located and what it should look like. When you present your ideas, explain how the mission will help meet our urgent goals for this part of the world. With gratitude, Archbishop Fonte, Mexico City, 10th of June, 1818. So, imagine students got that letter and you told them, in 3 weeks, kids, you're going to be presenting your proposal for this mission to the Archbishop. He's going to be visiting our classroom and you'll be making a presentation to him with visual aids, drawings, models, whatever you think will help make your presentation a good one. And of course, this is a simulation. It's not real. In history, sometimes you have to do that. You can't always have a real situation, a real problem when you're talking about history. But in this case, it's a simulated problem to solve. And so then students need to learn all these things that, to do this task, to figure out what the 22nd mission is going to look like and where it will be. Students are going to ask questions. So you generate a list of questions from the students. And this begins the inquiry process, the process of asking questions, finding answers, then asking deeper and deeper questions. And inquiry is very important in project-based learning. That's what makes it different from traditional teaching. So if you're my students, you would ask questions like this. What is a mission? Where are the other missions? What resources are there? How about the Indians? Why is this guy in Mexico asking us at Alta California? What will our presentation be like? And what are these urgent goals the Archbishop talked about? So you can see, now that the students have asked these questions, the teacher then can help them answer the questions, often through traditional assignments, textbooks perhaps, or lectures perhaps. But also students might do their own research, of course, to help answer their questions and generate some new questions. So that's an example of an in-depth main course project for California history. Excuse me. Here's a summary of what it means to really do in-depth project-based learning, not just projects. I'll let you read that for a second. So that California mission, as you can tell, was just teacher gave directions. The same directions are given every year. Students do it at home on their own. Maybe their parents help them too much sometimes. And it's mostly about the product. It's not about the process, not about the learning they're doing. And it's not authentic. It's not real to either the real world or their own lives. Okay, so project-based learning, we'll be exploring a lot of that material today, what it means to do in-depth project-based learning. To help make sure project-based learning is done well, the Buck Institute for Education has developed this model for gold standard project-based learning. In the center, you see the student learning goals, the knowledge, the understanding, the success skills you want students to learn. And around that are 7 elements that are essential for making a project high quality. Let's talk about these. Now, normally I would show you a video and have you discuss all these, whether you saw these things in a video, but you can look at some of the videos on our website later if you like and think about, does the project have these elements in it? First of all, key knowledge, understanding, success skills. That's what you want students to learn. And we show this image of a railroad track like a zipper because it all goes together. You don't teach students how to be critical thinkers independently of teaching them about history or literature or math or science. They have to think critically about something, solve problems about something. So sometimes people think, oh, we'll just teach students to be good collaborators or good, creative innovators. But you need to tie that to the content, to the knowledge in your subject area you want students to learn. Those are some very typical success skills you see in a lot of project-based learning. As you can see, all valuable skills for the workplace or students' lives. All right, so the first element I want to discuss is the challenging problem or question. This is pretty much the key piece of a project, what it's about. What are the students actually doing in the project? So you can see the challenging problem or question could come from the news. It could come from students' own lives, like the example, when do we grow up? They can look at that, answer that question by studying literature or psychology, science. It could be an issue in their school for younger students. That's their world, is their school. So lots of ways to get ideas for projects. I'll say more about that a little later. Sustained inquiry. That means students are asking questions, going deeper and deeper as they learn more about the subject of the project. As they generate more questions, they get deeper and deeper answers. And it takes place over time. That's what we mean by sustained. It's not just a couple of days. It's normally a couple of weeks. Authenticity. It's real world situations, real world problems, real to students' lives, real in their communities, or real things that are happening in their world. And that's what makes project-based learning motivating for students. Students have some voice and choice. You ask students what they think, what they want to learn, what questions they have, how they want to create their product, how they want to make their video commercial, how they want to build their model of the mission when the Archbishop comes for the presentation. So they have some choices to make, and the teacher and the students are partners in the learning process. Reflection. That means thinking about what you're doing, thinking about what you're learning, how you're learning, thinking about what you're creating in the project, how you're growing as a person. So reflection takes place during a project and at the end of a project. Many teachers have students keep a journal to write down their thoughts about what they're learning and how they are understanding what they're learning. At the end of a project, you often have discussions about what did we learn? What do we still have questions about? What else would we like to learn about this topic? So it's good to have reflection in the middle of a project and at the end. And critique and revision. This means you're getting formative assessment, what we call formative assessment. It's a way to improve your work, improve your learning, and students can be taught how to give each other feedback about their work. They can, the teacher, outside experts sometimes, and fellow students can critique your work and give you feedback to make it better. And finally, a public product. Students' work is seen by more than just the teacher and other students in the classroom. And this really helps make it motivating for students. If they have to present their work to a public audience, it could be parents, school leaders, other teachers and students, or even better, out in the real world, speaking to their local city government perhaps, or speaking to some scientists on a video conference to present their work to this outside audience. It really helps motivate students. It shows to the world what your students are learning and what they can do. It makes them very proud. It's like a celebration. Okay, so that's our model for gold standard project-based learning. So every project we think should have those elements to different degrees. They don't always have to have them, as I said, keep it limited when you're first starting out. You don't have to have a fancy product or this gigantic presentation to 100 people, but at least to some degree, make sure all these elements are in every project you do. There's a lot more on our website about that, by the way, articles and blogs about that gold standard model. Let's talk about designing projects. All right, here's where I said, remember, don't get too ambitious at first. Maybe start with a simpler project, and as you get used to it and students get used to it, you can go to more complex projects. And it varies by subject. For example, in mathematics, projects are often somewhat simpler and shorter than they might be in in history or in science. Oftentimes, teachers want to involve lots of other teachers. We'll have language art, writing and reading, science, math, art, and technology all in one project. And that's great, but maybe when you're starting out, you want to keep it simpler and just have one subject area, one teacher. As you can see, student autonomy, how much they're working independently. At first, teachers, I think, should design the project with some student input, some student voice and choice, but teachers do a lot of the planning ahead of time and manage it fairly tightly. Later, as students get more used to project-based learning and teachers know how to manage a project, students can be more involved in managing themselves and defining the project themselves. All right, some teachers might want to be customizers. That's an example of a customized motorcycle there. It's not always easy to design your own projects, and so you can find projects on the web and customize them, adapt them for your own students and your own classroom and your own needs. And that's a good way to start out when you're doing project-based learning, is find a good project from some other teacher that's been done and tried, and then it saves you some of the time, and also you can find a lot of creative ideas. Our website has a place you can search for projects, a project search tool which has about 500 projects, and you can search by grade level and subject area. They aren't all designed the exact same way, but you'll see they do have all those elements of gold standard PBL. Some people are designers. Some teachers really love to design projects. It does take time, especially at first. If you can work together with other teachers, that really helps to get good ideas going and save some time. And so when you're designing your own project, you often start by beginning with the end in mind. You imagine, what will students do at the end of this project? What will they create? Who will they present their work to? And that's a good way to start planning a project if you're designing your own. You can get inspiration for projects from many places. Your own community, what's happening in the world, or think about real-world problems. What do people in the real world do in their job, perhaps, that involves solving a problem using mathematics or using science? Your own curriculum guides, or in the United States, we have our standards, and many countries have content standards, which are guiding the curriculum. That might be a place you can get ideas for projects. Think of those guides or those standards that require students to dig deep and understand something that's very complex. Those are good sources of ideas for projects. Perhaps in your file cabinet or on your laptop, on your computer, you've got some good units or good ideas that you've done in the past which could be expanded to a gold standard project if you added some things to it, to the old material you have. You can make it into a gold standard project. Your colleagues, of course, can give you ideas, and your students. Find out you need to find out what's important to your students. What are their interests? What are their concerns? What are some real world issues and problems that they would find that they find authentic and interesting? I mentioned the online project libraries. And PBLU.org is a good website with about 20 pre-designed projects on it. We created that a few years ago, and we're going to be creating more things like that with pre-designed projects. But you can find from kindergarten up through high school projects at PBLU.org that are designed pretty well. All you need to do is customize them, adapt them a little bit for your classroom, and they're good to go. So check out PBLU.org. All right, so that's the question you need to ask yourself. What's a real world problem your students can solve, or what's real to them? What could they investigate that's real to them? There are several different kinds of projects. I'll briefly cover these. Some could be more of a philosophical question. A lot of teachers of literature and history like those kind of projects. It could be a historical time or an event or a natural phenomenon in science class. A problem-solving situation. It could be a controversial issue in society. For example, immigration would be a good example in many countries right now. Or it could be a challenge to create something, to design a product, to plan an event, or create their own book, or lots of things students could create or design or plan. Here's some examples of a philosophical question. That one on the left, when do we grow up? Which students investigate through reading, and also they could think about the science and psychology of that question. And you can see their major products there are fairly traditional, but they create a class blog, and that's the audience, the public audience for their work, to answer that question. In the younger students' example on the right, they're investigating what it means to work and having their own pizza restaurant in their classroom. And they talk to people in the community who actually are working in these kind of jobs, and their families, to think about what it means to work. So that's one kind of project. The historical event, the one on the left here, is about should the U.S. drop the atomic bomb on Japan? So students could be reenacting a situation in history where they're advisors to the president at an important decision. What should he do? A younger student's project on the right about evolution, where you can see the students are thinking about climate change and how might that affect animal evolution. And here's some examples of problem-solving situations. On the left, students are updating an old restaurant in their town. It's a business and some math in there. Or in the elementary school example on the right, there's mice in the school building. So students investigate what to do about that. And as you can see, they present their audience at the end. They present their work to the school principal, the custodian at the school, and someone from the school district who might be in charge of the buildings, for example. Here's some controversial issues. On the left is about a smoking tax, which we just voted on in California yesterday, actually, to raise the taxes on cigarettes. Some economics there, some mathematics. Or the use of school buses, which we don't see as much anymore in many places in the United States, unfortunately, but should our school keep the buses or not? You can learn a lot of math there and public speaking and writing and reading. Here are two examples of the design challenge kind of project. On the left, they're creating a mural. Oh, sorry. Yes, they're using math to create a mural. Nice piece of art for their school. And on the right, local history. That's a great way to make history come alive for students, is to talk to people in their communities and have a community event about how their own community's history ties to the history of their nation or the world. All right, the product students create should be authentic too. So it's not just a written report and a PowerPoint presentation every time. Those can get boring pretty quickly. As you know, if you ever sat through a lot of student presentations over and over again, they can be kind of boring. So let's get some authentic projects out there. Authentic products, I mean. It could be things like written products that are actually real world products. It could be a presentation of some sort, which includes a live event like a debate or a panel discussion, or a performance, a piece of music or dance. It could be an event students put on. Students love this, of course, media and tech projects. And these products could involve audio, visuals, including some traditional things like a photo essay or a collage or scrapbook. But make sure it's an authentic, the thing that students are creating is authentic for the project. For example, don't have students make a poster about climate change and put it up in their classroom. That's not really an authentic product. The authentic product would be perhaps posters they would put around their community to be seen by real people for a real purpose. Or perhaps it's not a poster, perhaps it's something on video which they put on their website. But make sure it's the product fits the purpose. Students can actually build something, models or exhibits or displays. It could be a plan to do something. Perhaps they can't actually build a building, but they can do a proposal for a building or a proposal for a new restaurant in their community. Okay, here's some examples. This is from one of our books, PBL in the elementary grades, that I co-authored. This talks about real-world roles and what people in the real world do and what kind of products they would create or what would be appropriate for those kinds of roles in the real world. I'm going to go over some of this a little bit quickly, so you'll have to go back and look at these documents in more depth later. I'm sorry to speed through these, but here we go. Oops, this slide didn't turn out so well. Let's skip that one. That just talks about those kind of products again. All right, here's a decision you could need to make as a teacher, and this might help when you're first starting out, keeping it simple. Will students produce the same product and the same focus, or different products with the same focus, or will it be the same product with different focus, or will they all be doing different topics, different products? Here's an example. This is a science project about water quality. So all students doing presentations about the quality of the water in their area. That's the simplest way to do a project. But you might want to add some more student voice and choice and have them, they can decide they're doing a presentation or a photo essay. You might want to limit their choices when they're first starting out especially. Don't let them choose from 10 different things. Maybe it's just 2 or 3 possibilities. Or will they all do a presentation but about different parts of their region? So there's some variation there, some voice and choice about what part of their region they want to study, the mountains, the valleys, the coast. Or are they all going to have different areas, different parts of the region, and different products? That gets more complicated to manage, but if you can go that way, that's great. All right, I'm going to go through this part. Actually, I'm not going to go in depth into these next few slides. I'm going to show them, and you can go back and look at them later because I want to make sure I have time for your questions and talk to you a bit about managing and assessment of projects. So just want to point out that the driving question is very important in a project. And to write a good driving question, there are 3 big criteria we give for a good driving question. It's engaging for students, because students are not going to say, yay, medieval history. I'd love to learn about that, teacher. The question must engage them. It must be an interesting question, make it sound like a challenge or a problem that they can solve that's interesting. It should be open-ended, which means there's no single correct answer. Students can't just Google it. If they can Google the answer to their driving question, it's not a good driving question. It should be something the teacher doesn't really know the answer to either. You are investigating this question along with students. And finally, it should be aligned with your learning goals. So to answer the question, are students going to need to learn the material you want them to learn? Now, I'll show some of these examples very quickly, and you can go back and look at them later when you have some time. Different ways to write a driving question depends on your project. It could be one of those philosophical questions. It could be more specific about a product to be created or a task. And you can add a real-world role for students. That works well, especially for younger students. Here are some examples of the philosophical kind of question, often used in literature, sometimes history, sometimes science. And you can see some of those questions are personal for students, like who is a good friend, and some are about their country or the world, about when is war justified. Here's some examples of driving questions that specify the product or the task, a picture book, a business plan, a fireplace log that burns colorful flames, a design for a new park in their community. And here's some examples of real-world roles where you say, how can we as medical students, how can we as engineers, as tour guides, do these things? I'll be showing you an example of that top question, a project where students were imagining they were medical students and a patient comes in, like an actor comes in with these symptoms. They have to diagnose this person, and they talk to some real doctors to find out what's wrong with this person and recommend the treatment. All right, I'll go over these very quickly. I'll just sort of click through them. Make sure that your driving questions don't just sound like a teacher, but they're more interesting for students. And you can see this second question is a local issue. The more local it can be, close to students' lives, the more motivating it is. That question sounds kind of dry, what you might see in a textbook, but what if it was more about a local issue? Well, they still had to learn about ecosystems to answer the question about adding a ski lift to a local mountain, but much more motivating. Or this one. You can find that out with a quick Google search. 5 minutes, you know the answer to that question. But if you ask why, that's a much deeper question. You can't answer that quickly in a Google search. All right, let's talk a bit about planning projects. When I see a question about the I don't know, I don't care students, yes, we all have those. I think when you have an engaging project, that problem tends to go away. If you find out what students are truly interested in and make them care about a topic, those students tend to wake up a little bit in class. And some students who are never engaged will become engaged with an interesting project. Here's how a typical project goes from the beginning to the end. You can see it's about four stages. A beginning where you launch the project with an entry event. I'll describe that in a second, and present students with a driving question. Or perhaps students develop the driving question with you if they're exploring a topic. Students then build their knowledge, understanding. This is where you teach. They go onto the web and find resources. They read, they write, they think. Then they begin to apply their knowledge to develop their products, their answer to the driving question. How can we, they also get some critique and revision in there, so they make sure their work is high quality. They might realize they need to go back and learn some more things. And finally, at the end, they present their products and their final answer to the driving question. Let's talk more about what entry events are. And I saw some questions also earlier about students working in teams. I'll be saying more about that in a few minutes. That can be one of the hardest parts of project-based learning, helping students work well together as a team. All right, this document looks a little fuzzy, but if you go to our website, you can see a project design overview document. It's a project planning form. It's a way for you to keep track of your project, to write down the learning goals, the driving question, what products individuals will create and what teams will create. Page 2 of this document talks about how they'll make their products public, what resources you need as a teacher to help manage the project, how students are going to reflect. You can find that planning form on our website. You just go to bie.org/resources, and you'll see a lot of different resources. And if you go under planning forms, you'll see these forms you can download and examples of them completed by teachers, like this one. It's a little hard to read, sorry about that. This is the medical interns project, where students are pretending they're medical students with a patient who has some problems. They recommend how to treat the patient. So you'll see lots of examples of these on our website. Okay. Another planning form you'll see on our website is our student learning guide. This is a way to help plan a project where you can't read all the words, sorry about that. On the left is the final product students are going to create. So say it's a written report recommending how that patient ought to be treated in the medical interns project. And so what are the learning outcomes? In the left column, what do they need to learn to do that product? What are some checkpoints in the middle column? How are you going to check their work? A rough draft, a first draft, a second draft? Are they going to have an outside expert check their work? And finally, on the right, how are you going to teach the material? How are you going to teach students to make sure they are ready for those checkpoints and are creating those products? So that's where you put down your lessons, your resources, the materials you're going to use to help teach the students. Oh, and that one you can't read. Look on our website. You'll see this completely filled out, showing an example from that medical interns project. A project calendar helps you keep track of what's going to happen each day. Week 1, week 2, sometimes week 3, week 4. Here's an example of a teacher planning their project with some sticky notes. Here's that medical interns project. As you can see, there's the green stickers there are the lessons and scaffolds and things to support the students, the learning experiences they're going to have, which the teacher will provide or they'll find on their own perhaps if they're doing independent research. And the yellow stickers represent sort of those checkpoints. So at the end of the first week, you want to see a summary of their research and their list of resources, their bibliography. There might be a first draft with peer critique in the middle of the second week. In week 3, there'll be a conference with the teacher where the teacher will sit with each team and check in with what each team is doing. The medical report is due at the end of that third week, and then the presentations perhaps happen the next day or the next week. Here's an example from the high school level where students are creating marketing materials for a department or a program at their school. So they're learning graphic design, some advertising skills, business kind of skills, and they could do a lot of technology in this kind of a project too. So in this project, here's an example of how the calendar is mapped out. A lot to read here. I just want to point this out. You can look at it later. You can see the teacher has planned every day pretty well what's going to happen, but there still might be, sometimes things will come up which you can't always predict. So you need to allow a little room for that. Perhaps it takes longer than you thought. Perhaps things are going, slower than you thought, or sometimes faster. So you need to adjust your calendar. And students should have some input into this too, especially as they get more used to project-based learning. Students can help you decide the pace of the project and what they're going to be doing on different days. And you can see after the presentation day there at the end, there's time for reflection, self-assessment, some peer assessment perhaps, and a debrief, a reflection, a look back at the project, and a celebration. You'll see lots of time for practice too, and this might even need more time. Before students make a presentation, make sure there's plenty of time to practice and get feedback from each other. You also see in this calendar lots of assessments. The team every day assesses how well they're doing and reports on how well they're making progress, any issues they're having, so the teacher can help troubleshoot issues. And you can see also there's that no need to know list at the beginning after students launch the project, like when they got that letter from the Archbishop of Mexico, that need to know list was created, and you add to that each, at different times during the project, you go back to that list and look at it. Say, okay, do we have new questions now? What have we learned? Let's cross out that one and add a new one. So you keep that list of questions going throughout the project to help guide students' inquiry. All right, the first day of a project on that calendar, you might see these kind of things. It might be a day or two, I should say. Depends how long a period you have. The entry event, a way to grab students' attention. I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. You create that list of questions. Perhaps you announce the project teams. And we recommend that teachers decide what the teams are going to be. Do not let students choose their own teams. You could ask for their input. Ask them who they want to work with and give them one of their choices. But it's important to create teams that are balanced, that have a variety of skills according to what the project needs. Some students might have art skills or technology skills, and so you want to spread them around different teams. And it can help solve a lot of problems if you plan the teams in advance, because even students who are friends, if they work together in a team, they might not be friends after the project, because it can be difficult sometimes to work together. And in the real world, people often work in teams, and they don't get to pick who's on their team. That's just the team at their job. You might expect what it means to work well, discuss what it means to work well as a team. Have students create a list of descriptions of what it means to work well as a team. I'll show you, we have rubrics for collaboration skills you can share with students, or have them create their own rubric, a set of norms or expectations for how we're going to work together. And then start those team meetings. It's good to have a team building activity. And this often happens even before projects, where teachers will have students learn what it means to work in a team with some sort of fun activity before the real project starts. Because that's one of the hardest things for students, especially if they're only used to learning individually. They never worked in teams very much in school. You need to teach them how to work in a team. So do team building activities, you could do fun games or other kinds of activities. Build a structure out of gum and spaghetti or something. You can have all kinds of activities which teach them how to work well together. And create a list of what they need to do, that initial task list. What are our tasks in this project, and how are we going to get them done? All right, now I mentioned the entry event to help grab students' interest in a project, because they're not going to jump for joy with every topic you present. So you need to grab their interest sometimes. For example, you could have a field trip to go out and visit somewhere outside of school. Bring in a guest speaker. For example, that medical interns project began when a doctor in a video conference spoke to the students about a patient that needed help. A part of a film or a video, or looking at websites. It could be an activity, a piece of reading that's interesting. Some statistics about sea level rise in our city, or something like that that's really startling and grabs their attention. The piece of real or mock correspondence, that's like the letter from the Archbishop. That was a fake piece of correspondence, but it could also be a real letter from, say, a letter from their city government saying, we'd like your help figuring out this problem we have with pollution in the river in our city, and please make a presentation to us. And a real letter coming from the leader of a city, or someone who works in the city government, to the students, that really makes it motivating. It could just be a discussion, or a piece of literature or song or poem, art, anything that sort of launches the project. It generates questions, and it makes students want to begin the project. Here's a few quick tips on managing. I know our time is almost up here, so I'm trying to keep track of your questions. Please do try and get them in if you have questions. To manage a project, these are the kind of documents typically that teachers develop. An information sheet to give students about the project. That's for older students. You wouldn't do that for 6-year-olds, but a calendar, which you might display on the wall or put online for students. The rubrics, the descriptions of how they're going to be assessed for a product or for how well they're going to, how their teamwork skills or their presentation skills. Lots of different rubrics you might make available for students for the project. A checklist of the requirements for their product, grading information, contracts, task lists, those kind of things that help students manage their work. A list of the teams, the schedule of when presentation day is happening, which really is motivating. They've got to present their work in public. They're going to be motivated. They know they've got 3 weeks. And a list of resources they might begin with. For younger students, and even older students, teachers often create a project wall, which has these things on it in the classroom. All right, and here's an example of a team contract. And this is students could create this themselves, or you could give one to students, which they add to, and now the team members agree to this, and that's kind of their check-in document. They can then look back on that when their teams meet over the project and see if they're fulfilling their agreements. That helps students working, keep themselves on track. And there are versions of this on our website you can find. You can download this one. There's also a simpler one for younger students. And this also is how the real world works. Real world teams often make agreements about how they're going to work together. And here's an example of one of those, a task list. Who's going to do what by when, and help students keep track of their work and make sure it gets done. So the teacher can check this, students can check themselves and hold each other accountable in their team. There's an example of a rubric for collaboration. These are on our website. You can download them all for free, different grade levels. These are aligned with our Common Core State Standards English Language Arts requirements. But you can ignore those numbers and just use these. We have them for different grade levels. This is for older students. And they can then check themselves by looking at this rubric and give themselves even a score, perhaps, or write some reflections about how well they're doing on this rubric, both during and at the end of a project. All right, for assessment, that already was touched upon with the rubrics I mentioned. And I want to just give you this message before we have to wind up here, that you can use a lot of traditional teaching tools in project-based learning. You can still give students tests and quizzes and other writing assignments that you would do in regular teaching, but because you have to measure student learning. It's important to measure individual students' learning. Don't just base your grades or your scores on a group product. Some teachers in PBL don't even grade the group product. It's still important for students because they're going to present it to do good quality work, but the grades are all based on individual, more traditional assessments during the project. So in project-based learning, though, there is some balance between what you traditionally assess, with a traditional test or assignments, and in project-based learning, you might also have self and peer assessment. Teams might assess their own work. You have more formative assessment, those checkpoints to see if the work is progressing. You think more about the process. How are we learning? And assess that. How well are students solving a problem? How well are they managing themselves, managing their work? And finally, you also assess those 21st century skills, those 21st century competencies, like collaboration, presentation, problem solving. There's an example of a project grade sheet. As you can see on this is a class about, it's a high school academy where they learn about hospitality and tourism industry. And you can see in this project that a lot of those points, most of the points are individual assignments. Only two, the video commercial storyboard and the commercial itself, are team scores. And even for the team score, you could break it down and figure out what each student did to contribute to that storyboard. Through self-reporting, through teacher observations, you can make sure individual students are all being assessed on their contribution to the team product. And as you can see at the bottom there, students are assessed also, so they get points for how well they make a presentation, both as a team and their own individual performance, as well as how well they collaborated. Oh, there's that collaboration rubric again, and here's oh, you can't read. Oh, you can read it all right. This is on our website too, a presentation rubric, which you can use during a project's presentations, and students can score each other. It's a good thing for the audience to do, is to score each other using this. And of course, they use this rubric during the project to prepare, to practice. And that's page 2 of that same rubric. And here's an example for little kids. Oh, that black bar should not be in there, but as you can see, this is a simple rubric for younger children about how to make a good presentation. All right, so that's about all I've got for now. It's a 9:03 here in California in the morning, so we've gone for about an hour. And I didn't add all the links to the chat, but you'll find all these on our website. There's a rubric for designing a project using those gold standard elements. You'll see a project design rubric. You'll see rubrics for assessing students on our website, as I mentioned, and a lot of those forms for planning a project with lots of examples of those forms completed by teachers. And I hope you'll go to our website and look at that material. And please feel free to contact me. We've got a lot of social media. You can find examples of our work in a lot of places, a lot of good videos on YouTube. And we are active on Twitter, and we have a good Facebook page. And you can contact me if you like. I'd love to hear from you. If you need feedback on an idea for a project, or you want to ask me a question, please do. That's my email address, and I'm on Twitter.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. There was one question that one teacher was asking. Is it possible to enter your website? I mean, you have to sign up, probably. Is it like free to sign up
Right,
and then
you have to
get
sign
all
up.
the documents?
Right, you sign in, and then you can get all the documents, and it's all for free.
Okay, great. Yes. So, yes, maybe. No
I'm just
question.
looking at questions here. Any last minute questions, anyone?
I can't see any question. Very helpful, very interesting, of course. Thanks a lot, because you really just showed us very practical ideas and all these examples of the project. It was really great.
Okay, well, I hope people can go back and look at that. If I went over something too quickly, please go back and review it. And you can also check out our books if you like. We just wrote a new booklet for parents to explain PBL to parents, because that's not the way most parents learn. So it is very important that parents understand what you're doing. And they may be surprised not to see typical homework assignments. So let parents know what it means to teach in project-based learning style and how it might look different for their students.
Yes, it's really important, because parents are usually not very, open to these ideas. To these new ways of teaching. We have this problem in Slovakia, for sure. So
yes, and students aren't used to it either. You might even have to, convince students to try a project at first. But if it's engaging, if it's interesting, I think they're going to enjoy it more than just traditional learning.
Yes, that's true. But first, they really sometimes it's for them easier to follow this traditional learning. So we just need somehow to push to push them and really inspire them.
Right. Some students like to just sit there and listen to a teacher lecture and memorize information for a test. It seems simpler that way. But once students and teachers and parents see good project-based learning, they do not want to go back.
Sorry, it's not possible to hear me. Okay, there is like echo, I think.
I'm hearing you.
Okay. Great. Yes, it's nice that there are some responses that for parents it's nice, so it's okay to. Of course, not all parents are like that, so we just need to work with them as well, and yes, so and students, and to have this support. Sometimes teachers don't have support, parents even sometimes not from headmaster, and so it's not so easy. That's why we have this community that we can motivate and inspire each other. And maybe when we have like practical these examples that we can show, and even show them to parents and to community, then we can have probably also this support from them. First, we need to show them that
Yeah, there's
okay, in these schools or in these teachers really did this and it was successful, and maybe then it could
right
be helpful.
showing parents examples of successful projects and good student work is a great way to get parents on board. There's a nice little video on our website, a cartoon video about 3 minutes long called PBL Explained, and it's now in a couple of different languages. It's in Spanish. There's one version in Chinese. I'm not sure about other European languages, but you could show this little video to parents also as a way to introduce them to project-based learning.
Yes,
PBL
that's great.
Explained on our video list.
Yes. Yes, I checked all these materials already, and I know that they are really. It's awesome to have all your materials of this back institute are really something that we should have a look and learn from it. So no questions from the participants.
Yeah, it looks like
They are going to sign up right now to your website.
right. All right, Cornelia. Well, maybe I better go then.
Yes. So thanks a lot. Thank you so much for joining us and presenting all these great ideas. Really have learned
You're welcome.
a lot, and I hope that I can share your presentation in our group for all teachers to have it, and also, of course, these recordings as well, because we have
Okay.
almost like 400 teachers, and I will also put this recording of this presentation to my another eTwinning group where I have 1,500 teachers. So I think that many teachers will benefit from this. So thank you so much,
Great.
and have a nice
Well,
day. Have a great day. Many greetings to you
all right.
from all of us.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.